with this. It's hard. And you're going to have Professor Hickey talking in a little bit about differences between Hong Kong and Taiwan. And of course, there are many. Now, with regard to timing, Hong Kong's had some problems. In 2003, this was the marketing. Hong Kong will take your breath away. It was a good slogan. Unfortunately, it was rolled out just as SARS hit. A respiratory syndrome that did take people's breath away. Timing is a challenge sometimes. Now, I've already said that US-Taiwan relations have been fairly stable, and the two things that I want to hit upon are the importance of effective communication, constant communication, and secondarily, the importance of predictability, trust. Trust comes out of predictability, and that's something that we want to talk about. With regard to cross-strait relations, much less stable, but manageable. Now, the thing, of course, to keep in mind, that cross-strait relations will be influenced by the current state of US-China relations. And how are US-China relations today? Maybe not as good as they could be, right? And we'll hit upon some of those things in just a bit. But I think under the best of circumstances, it's going to be difficult. Things in China have changed, and I think it's worth talking about those changes. Now, we've had ups and downs in the Taiwan-US relationship. This is from 2003, where with the visiting Chinese Prime Minister, Premier Wen Jiabao, George Bush complained about unilateral changes, changing the status quo. And specifically, he was complaining about the administration of President Chen Shui-bian. So this might be thought in some ways as a low point in US-Taiwan relations. But in fact, even with some of the changes that President Chen and his associates engineered, relations across the strait began to improve in terms of trade, travel, these kinds of things. So even in difficult times, progress is sometimes possible. And it's important for us to keep that in mind. Now, one of the people who served President Bush, Randy Shriver, is now back in government. At that time, he was in the State Department, and now he is in the Defense Department. And he is the Assistant Secretary for East Asia, and somebody with close ties to Taiwan. Here, in fact, he's receiving an award from President Chen Shui-bian after he had stepped down from the State Department. So there's some continuity in Taiwan-US relations as well. Now, if you ask Americans about the key issues in the US-China relationship, first of all, there's a generational divide. Young people are much more concerned than older people about human rights. And we saw something of President Trump's ideas about human rights recently in his comments about Hong Kong, describing it as purely an internal matter for China. Territorial disputes. You can see that older people think this is a big, I'm sorry, I had this backwards. Older people think that human rights is a bigger issue. Territorial disputes, older people think is a bigger issue. Younger people are more worried about the environment and the impact of China's rapid development on the environment. China-Taiwan tensions. You can see relatively few Americans think it's an issue. If I go to China and ask, 90%. Now, I'm not allowed to ask, by the way. Polling is a problem. In the past, it's been possible to carry out polls, but in the last 2-3 years, it's not been possible to ask these kinds of questions. But you can see that more older people are concerned about China-Taiwan tensions than younger people. But the vast majority of Americans don't think that it could become a serious problem that could result in conflict. Communication, contact. And of course, the most important contact isn't in the news. The most important contact is the stuff that happens every day on the phone with representatives on the ground. But there's also, of course, high-profile contact. So Tsai Ing-wen visits Los Angeles, and I wrote 2017, but I should have written 2018. And you had people fly banners welcoming her, and people fly banners condemning the visit. And of course, she's just visited the United States again, going to New York, getting her picture with the Statue of Liberty, and also visiting the National, basically, Weather Service. Okay? Now this is significant because this is a US government installation. How significant? I don't think it's that significant, but it is a change. So communication is important. And all of you know that the US Congress has passed an act to encourage the two governments to have more frequent and higher level contact. Some people don't think this is a good idea. Many of those people are in Beijing, but there are people here in the United States who worry that it's poking the bear, poking the panda. But just in the last 4 months, Foreign Minister Joseph Wu has visited and spoken in the United States, in Los Angeles, with the World Affairs Council, and Mainland Affairs Council Minister Chen Ming-tong spoke at RAND in Los Angeles recently as well. David Lee, the National Security Advisor, met with John Bolton, the American National Security Advisor. I'm pretty sure he's not calling. I apologize. Communication, but also assurances. Now, assurances, it's important to remember, work both ways. The United States has assured Taiwan through the Taiwan Relations Act and through presidential statements that the United States is committed to helping Taiwan defend itself through the sale of defensive weapons. But the assurance